Hello, colleagues. My name is Arthur Deakin. I work for NPQ Online as Chief Assessor, and I've also been involved in the design and creation of the new assessment structures for UCL. So this short video this evening or today is actually to look at a particular aspect of summative assessment. That is the JAR score, or JAR score for short, and to explain why it's needed and its impact on the overall score that you will receive from your assessor once you've submitted your work. So let's go on to the next slide. From the case study, you will see a description of how judgments and scores are determined for each question. And just to recap, there are actually 5 questions in your assessment, each of which carries equal weight. And each question is related to one of the assessment strands from the framework for your particular NPQ. For each of the strands, for each of the framework domain statements, there is a score awarded by the assessor, which is either 3, 2, 1, or 0, as defined here. And you can see that a score of 3, the assessor strongly agrees, whereas a score of 0 means that the assessor strongly disagrees. So if we look at what that actually looks like on the document that you will receive ultimately, this is a section from the front page of the DMF, that's the Decision, Marks and Feedback form. And you can see in terms of the domain statement scores here, then the assessor has awarded grade a score of 2 for Foundation Domain Statement 1B, 3 for Statement 2B, 2 for 4B, etc., with an overall score of 11. So that is what the scoring for the domain statements looks like. But actually, what I want to talk about today is over on the left here, which is actually what we call the JAR correction. And you can see I have a string of scores on the left-hand side, 0, 0, 1, 0, etc., with the impact of a correction, a JAR adjustment or correction of -1, which means that although the domain framework statement score total was actually 11, with this correction it brings it down to 10, which is just a pass grade. Now, had I got a string of zeros against the JAR scores, I could have had an overall JAR correction of -2, which would have brought it below the pass grade. So let's just go back to the document I was sharing a moment ago, which shows or begins to describe what the JAR adjustment is all about. So JAR stands as an acronym, actually stands for an indication that the answers that you have provided are justified, and are justified actually from your analysis of the case study as presented, rather than being a theoretical generic response. Also, the A stands for application, in the sense that you have applied your learning acquired during your NPQ program with UCL. And the R actually stands for the fact that your responses are realistic and actually achievable. It's one thing to come up with, as it were, a cunning plan. It's quite another for that plan to be realistic and actually to be capable of being delivered in a real school. So overall, that's what we're talking about, this JAR adjustment. which actually overall, there's a number of points, jar points as we call them, on the left-hand side here, which actually then gives a jar adjustment, which adjusts your overall framework domain statement total. So looking at the slide itself, the jar mark adjustment, as you see, is a score of between -2 and +2 marks, which is either added or subtracted from your overall framework domain statement total. So question 1 in each tab, which we'll look at in a minute, is about does the evidence relate specifically to the case study? Is it justified? Question 2 on the score, as we show in a moment, is about the application of learning, and certainly you must be able to show that your responses in the final summative assessment here illustrate the learning that you've achieved during the program with UCL. So if I actually go into one of the domain statement tabs, this is what it actually looks like in one of the tabs. At the bottom here is the, I'll start at the top. These are the actual, this is the domain, there's the domain statement, and we've got what we call learn how to and learn that statements. There is then at the bottom here, and I've only shown you a little bit of it, there is actually the mark scheme itself, and against the mark scheme, the assessor has scored a number of each of these strands, 3, 2, 1, 0, 3, 2, 1, 0, and eventually you get to an overall score for each tab. However, what I want to look at the top here is this jar score. And the jar score is a yes-no judgment. So the assessor will actually decide whether the evidence that you have presented against this tab, in this case the 1B tab, is such that, does it relate specifically to the case study, and is it justified? In this case, against domain statement 1B, the answer the assessor came up with was no. So overall, you've got a score of 0 points on that jar question, question 1. Jar question 2, again, the response was no, that was not true, that we can't see evidence that you have applied learning from your NPQ program with UCL, and therefore that's 2. So let's go on and let's have a look at another tab. This is tab 2B. Different domain statement, different learn how to and learn that statements, and different sub-statements here in terms of assessment strands, which are scored differently, okay? Now, on this case, or in this case, then the assessor, in terms of the jar question, on the first jar question, has decided, yes, it looks as though you have used an analysis of the actual case study in response to your answers to the 5 questions. Actually, to this particular question shows that the assessor could answer yes to that, whereas on the second question the answer was no, and therefore the first question you get a jar score of 1, second question you get a jar score of 0. So this is a slide that I've shown you previously, and on this slide we've got the domain statement scores 2, 3, 1. And then if we look at the score for 1B, as we've just had a look, the jar score for 1B was 0 and 0. So the total jar score, point score for 1B is 0. Look at 2B, if you remember, we looked at that a moment ago. Then for 2B, the answer to question 1 was yes, so that's just a jar points total of 1, whereas the answer to the second jar question was no, so that's a score of 0. So overall, adding up all the jar points scores for the other 3 tabs, which we've not looked at in this short video, then altogether, in terms of question 1, the participant here scored 3 out of 5. On question 2, on jar question 2, they scored 1 out of 5, so a total was 4. If then you look at the bottom here in terms of a description of the jar points themselves, it actually says if the jar total is 9 or 10 points, then we add 2. If it's 7 or 8, we add 1. If it's 5 or 6, then the correction is 0. In this case, the jar points total was 4. So with a jar points total of 4, as it says in the rubric here, if it's 3 or 4 points, then 1 mark is deducted. So it is 4 points. As we can see here, the jar points total is 4 points. And therefore, the jar adjustment, according to this rule here, is -1. So overall, the -1 is added to the framework domain statement score. And in this case, it's 11 minus 1, which gives 10. So that is actually just a pass grade, as opposed to 11 would have been a really clear pass grade, as we see. So that, for now, hopefully, is a quick run through of jar points and the jar score, and trying to demonstrate very much what the jar score is and why it is needed. Thank you for watching this short video. I sincerely hope it is useful.